Okay, I'd like to welcome everybody to the Pelham Board of Education meeting of October 7th, 2020. Would everybody please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, this brings us to 2.4, which is reiteration of the executive session motion. Sue.
Yes, the board met in executive session to discuss the record of a particular student and the employment history of a particular person.
Thank you so much. So I wanted to welcome everybody. Maybe if we could just mute, everybody mute. Okay, thanks. I wanted to welcome everybody to our meeting and thank everybody who was involved in helping us pivot to our virtual format again. We had hoped to welcome members of our community in person, and those especially who wanted to join us for public comment. And we will look forward to going back to that model and having, again, members of the community with us in person at our meetings at our next board meeting. As it was noted in our public meeting notice, that due to public health concerns, physical in-person attendance by members of the public will be limited to a maximum of 34 individuals. And those who attend in person will have their temperature screened, and they're required to complete a health screening questionnaire prior to entry. And the building will be open to them at 8 p.m. We ask all those who will attend with us in person to wear a mask or a face covering at all times and to maintain physical distance. As always, like tonight, our meetings will be live streamed on YouTube, and they will continue to be archived on our district website. So we'll look forward to having members of the public with us next time. For this meeting, I will go back to our other format of receiving public comment to my email at jddomenico@pelhamschools.org. I need to receive the comment by 9 p.m. this evening. Please make your comments as brief as possible, as I will be reading them into the record, and include your name and your Pelham mailing address. So I wanted to give everybody a reminder that for those who are interested in serving in our district committees for this school year, that the application process, which was posted onto our district website, will close tomorrow at October 8th. So it's a great opportunity to become involved with our Pelham school community and to help guide the important work that our district takes part in each year. So we hope that everybody who is interested has either already submitted an application or will do so before tomorrow. There is some information on the website about each of our committees and the time commitment that it involves. And it's important to note that unlike years in the past, where our meetings took place in school, we will have all of our meetings meet virtually for this school year. We're going to review the application and select top candidates to fill the open vacancies, and we will be in touch with applicants in the coming weeks. As you also likely saw in one of our recent communications, the district seeking feedback in its hybrid learning plan to gather what's working well and what improvements might be needed to assure that students' needs are being met. And as with other surveys that were conducted last year, the digital tool Thought Exchange is being used to gather feedback. Feedback from students and teachers is also being collected via other Thought Exchange questionnaires. And the deadline for parents to contribute to the Thought Exchange is coming up on Tuesday, October 13th. So please weigh in so that we have your feedback. And in closing, I'd like to acknowledge that yesterday is World Teachers Day. And it goes without saying that Pelham has some of the most dedicated teachers. Our board appreciates our teachers' abilities to tend to the needs of our students' varied strengths, circumstances, and interests, and for their patience to meet our students where they are in any given day, and to inspire our students to be more than they see in themselves. And this year, they do it all while wearing masks all day long. So we thank them for everything that they do for our students. So this brings us to section 3, which is approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the regular meeting minutes of the meeting of 9/23 2020.
So moved.
Thanks, Vinny.
Second.
Thanks, Sue. Do you have any questions or comments? Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? This brings us to administrative and committee reports. Item 5, I'm tongue-tied tonight. 4.1 is the superintendent's report. Dr. Champ.
Thank you. Just a quick question. Did we do the reiteration of executive session motions?
Yes, we did.
We did.
All right, I'm
We did.
sorry. It went so
Okay.
quickly. Okay, so welcome. Yes, happy to have everybody here tonight. And I too thank everyone for making the quick shift to the virtual meeting. I will start with just an update there. As everyone knows, we had a power outage at the high school at sometime about 2:30, give or take, either side of 2:30 this afternoon. It was a broken wire on a pole on Corley's. So Con Ed, and that did trigger certainly the power outage and then fire alarms. The fire department arrived, assessed the situation because we did have smoke coming from some of the mechanical equipment related to our electrical supply. So that was quickly resolved, and Con Ed was on site. I think they were here. Jim will probably be able to tell me about an hour and a half ago. They arrived on site, got the power reconnected, and we're still waiting to hear back from John Sabalos, our director of technology, on the reset of the internet. We're at this point hoping that we'll be in good shape to open as normal tomorrow. But appreciate everyone's flexibility. It actually was kind of nice to know that we had a backup plan. If we needed to shift to remote, that we could still continue with instruction, even if things weren't resolved quickly. We just want to thank our staff and our administrators who very quickly handled the situation. Jim, John Condon, Ralph DeMasi, and our building administrators. Also want to thank the local fire chief who came, immediate response, and just did a fantastic job. Synergias were a big help from the building inspector as well as district electrician, and really just Johnny on the spot isolated the problem very quickly, which helped us to quickly know what we're dealing with. So we're real thankful for that. We're still waiting for the final yes on power and internet but we will send something out hopefully tonight, just letting folks know that we're in good shape for tomorrow. So I also want to touch on the thought exchange. Jessica did mention that. We're definitely getting lots of thoughts in. We do encourage folks to fill that out. We're going to be meeting with the folks from Thought Exchange to help them walk us through the data. So we, as an administrative team, help us to have a really good understanding of what it's saying, really objectively, for them to just show us what the data says. We did put some important demographics in there this time, especially our goal is to be able to look at the data at the different levels, because I think we're all recognizing this is playing out very differently at the secondary level as compared to the elementary level. So we did put in demographics to be able to look by building and by level, because we really think once we're able to look at the feedback through those different separated lenses, it's going to start to really tell us a better story about what's going on and what the feedback is like in those smaller silos, to help us then adjust the program. So our hope is to come and do a brief presentation of that at our next board meeting. We do have NYU scheduled to come present the equity audit results, so that we'll probably have a lot of presentations at our next meeting. But we do think it's important that we come and bring that information publicly, the feedback back to the board, so that we can have a discussion about what the data is showing us about ways that we should look to evolve, tweak, and adjust our plan. So we look forward to sharing that with you at our next meeting. Athletics is up and running. Very excited about that. We started on the 29th with a pared down fall season. So far, so good. And I just keep saying that every day, every week that we get through of still being in person with no COVID issues in the building is something that we just feel blessed to have and very thankful for. So again, we added athletics. So that's a new variable that we've introduced into the system. So now we're kind of in that, seeing what happens now that we've started that up. One thing I do know is we have a lot of happy kids. So the kids who are coming in are happy to be there. Now the kids who are getting to get out on the field and practice and be with their teammates, that adds another level of happiness and normalcy. So we're really excited about that. Thanks to Chris Hodge, our new athletic director. I know he had a very successful parents meeting this week. Really excited about that. I know also, I'll just highlight, he's working with Alex. He got training this week on our district website software. So Mr. Hodge is definitely looking to increase communication and visibility of our athletics department. So I just want to recognize him and those efforts, and I just encourage everyone to keep an eye on the athletics webpage and keep looking out for athletics communications. He's really staying on top of things, and certainly Section 1 is really the state athletic department certainly guides everything that we do. Section 1 is making decisions of how we want to handle COVID issues as a region, and we are following Section 1's guidance. So probably the most interesting thing that came out recently is that they will be allowing spectators at games. The recommendation, and we're going to be following that recommendation, is similar to the rec programs for the summer, 2 spectators per home player. So just something to be aware of. So Jim and Chris and I will be talking to make sure we've got a plan in place, whether it's something like a gate list or a checklist, just to make sure that we're adhering to those requirements so that we can all continue to stay safe. And I just remind folks, I know this summer, everyone was playing together and doing lots of these things, and we're excited that as a school, we're starting to be able to get back to that level as well. But we have a responsibility to do it in a very safe way, in a methodical way, and give ourselves time to add new variables, see how it goes, make sure it's going well before we then move to the next level of variables. So, but again, excited to have athletics up and running and looking forward to some of those games starting up. And the last piece I would say, and I know I already mentioned the NYU audit is coming up next at our next meeting. We are hosting this week one more forum that we really felt was important to add to that audit from a qualitative perspective. Natalie is going to be doing a session, Natalie Zorger, specifically for our BIPOC staff. So, our Black, Indigenous, people of color. She's going to be hosting a forum specific for them so that we can understand what it is like to be a staff member of color within our Pelham schools. That's, Steve and I have talked about this in the past. This is definitely one of the pieces when you talk about hiring practices, creating an environment that people of color want to come and work in, and then having a school culture that supports, welcomes them and makes them want to stay, where they feel like they are part of the fabric of that culture. So we need to understand the things that will attract people to us, and then more importantly, the things that will keep people in our district. So, because that is an important priority for all of us. So we're excited about that, and that will be, I think, a smaller, more intimate setting, and hopefully one where folks can be, as they have been in all the sessions, very, feel free to speak, the truth, speak, honestly, so that we can get great feedback to bring to the board to set out the action plan for the remainder of the year. So we're excited about that and looking forward to that continued partnership. And I think that will end my report for tonight.
Hey, Cheryl, can I ask a question?
Sure.
So for an away game,
Yes.
we are not allowed to attend. It's only the home team's family or 2 members of their family or whomever.
I believe that's the recommendation from Section 1, although I believe there is also some leeway at the district level to choose if they're even going to allow spectators at all, or if they're going to adhere to the 2 per home team. Are they going to allow visitors, spectators, or are they not going to allow any spectators? I do think there is some district choice. So, that's something I would actually encourage you to reach out to Mr. Hodge. He's probably got the most up-to-date information from me, more so than me. And he also may know what position other districts are taking on that issue.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I'll follow up him on that as well to see if there is consistency or if it's going to be a district by district decision.
Got it.
I know with things like travel soccer, which obviously is outside of the schools, that there are different regulations depending on what field you go to. And so in some cases, parents can attend, there's a limit. In other cases, they have to stay in their car. So it may be that different districts have different rules.
Yeah.
So, but just to clarify, we can have 2 parents per home player, two people per home player, but we are not allowing any guests. For
That was the position that, when he and I spoke, that we both kind of felt like there was some wisdom in that, just because able to, again, to maintain a level of control over who's coming on the property, what level of exposure, because we know our folks, we can have our folks sign in or use that gate list approach. If we get into a situation of needing to contact trace, it's going to be far more challenging to weigh spectators. I mean, maybe not impossible, but that's really one of the biggest challenges we saw, is if we had a situation of contact tracing, having to deal with away spectators, we'd get into a lot of potentially a lot of difficult situations. Certainly something we can revisit if the board wants to see us look in a different direction. We were trying again to do those things that maintain safe control, reasonable control where we felt we could. If we did go to allowing visitor spectators, we would have to look at staffing. We'd have to look at additional staff for the games. Which again, if we want to go in that direction, we certainly could. But it would definitely have personnel impacts.
And just to follow up to the power outage, you said that you're hoping to have a communication, or some update on where we are for tomorrow morning by tonight, if possible.
Yeah, I mean, the communication that we sent out earlier tonight said, if you don't hear anything, assume that school is on tomorrow. So we don't necessarily have to put something out, but it would be nice if we were able to affirmatively say tonight that we're good for the morning, because I know people do tend to worry. So.
Well, and also for those cohort B parents, I'm sure it's
yeah,
big swing in their day if their kids stay home learning versus in person.
Exactly, it makes a huge difference. So.
Yeah. Okay, great. Any other questions? Okay. Item 4.2 is the Board of Education committee reports. Do we have any committee reports?
The audit committee. On Friday, September 25th, the audit committee met. The primary purpose of the meeting was to review the final results of our external audit and to review the results of the extra classroom activities report with Chris Koff, partner at O'Connor Davies. Chris will be actually presenting the results to the entire board this evening, so I don't want to steal much of his thunder, other than to say that I'm happy to report it was a clean audit, and the auditors did not identify any major deficiencies in our internal controls. Now, when I say material or / major deficiencies, there were a few minor ones that were brought to light, mainly in the area of segregating of duties, and in our extra classroom activities report, there were some inactive clubs that were brought to light. And accordingly, we addressed each of these findings in our corrective action plan. In addition to that, they encountered no difficulties with respect to any of our financial people, with Jim, with Jackie, no disagreements with management, which is always a good thing. And in conjunction with that, we executed our management letter to O'Connor Davies. So I'm sure Jim will expand a little more on that, as will Chris later on.
Thanks, Ben. Yeah, I'm looking at my opening remarks, and I meant to say that we were going to be welcoming them from O'Connor Davies to present the audit. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other committee reports? So we haven't yet had an advocacy or community outreach committee meeting yet because we haven't formed our new committee. But I was able to tune into the advocacy update at the West Putt through West Putt and learned some interesting things. And I'm sure we'll come back to you with more as our committee gets to meet. But I just wanted to mention that there is very much a focus on the cost of returning to school. And, with all these new COVID protocols and health safety measures in place, what budget cuts we may see coming down the pike at the state level if we don't get more funding from the federal level, and those being some real realities in the next year. And just talking about big picture, all the issues on the table that school districts may want to advocate on finding cost savings within our school budgets, and giving us some relief there, given that we may have shrinking contributions from the state. So more to come on that, but I just wanted to mention that I was able to join that call. Okay. So next is item 4.3, which is Assistant Superintendent's update on authentic learning.
Great, good evening. So just it was some procedural things in terms of the state level. I just want to update the board and also the community on, if you remember last year with the pandemic and the move to virtual learning, the state actually rescinded the 3 through 8 and regions state testing. Those assessments were basically not given last year. And in essence, that also impacted the APPR approach, and that the whole assessment piece of the APPR, 50%, was taken away for that past year. So with this year, with the kind of discrepancies and the variations of reopening plans across the state, educators are really kind of worried about whether we're going to be able to really be ready to actually administer these exams, because every school district is different in terms of their approach, with different hybrids, with different openings. And there really is a distinct inequity across the state in terms of the learning experiences of kids. So with that said, the Board of Regents did talk about it, and they acknowledge that there's this uncertainty for this school year, and that the interim state commissioner, Betty Rosa, is really focusing on this, and that they are going to determine at some point, they're going to weigh all this evidence, and they're going to look at the flexibility that may be needed to ensure that they can actually administer these exams or not. So, every state did submit a plan in terms of their educational approach for reopening, but still there are a lot of outliers in terms of the different types of experiences kids are happening across the state. So with that said, there are a lot of things that the state's going to weigh and look into, and they did state that for us. So I just want to share with the board, but also with the community. They're going to weigh in several factors, whether they're actually going to administer these state assessments this year. Right now, we're expecting state assessments to be administered. However, the state is saying that they're going to explore whether these assessments can actually be done in a fair, equitable, and safe manner for all kids and also for teachers. They're also going to look in providing flexibility in the ways that the test could be administered, because they have to be administered in person. They can't administer these exams virtually. They are also concerned about the U.S. Department of Education and the Secretary of Education, which did state back in September that they're directing states to administer these exams in the 2020-21 school year. So, and that no waivers are going to be accepted. The one thing which we all know is that in November, we don't know the outcome of the election. So at this point, the state really can't apply for a waiver. It's not going to be granted. If there's a different administration, there may be a different approach. We just don't know. And that the state is, if there is a change in administration, they will explore ways to apply for a waiver if that is extended by the federal government. So there's a lot of unknown out there. And it's just important for everyone to know that we're just going to keep on updating everyone. And really, this is a great concern for all educators, because there's a certain level of preparation that goes into for these exams as well. And teachers are already stressed out in terms of how students are learning and the different approaches. And you have virtual kids, and then you also have in-person students and different cohorts coming in and out. And it is a great challenge for all the teachers. So if there was an understanding at the outset that there would be a moratorium again on state assessments, I think that would be very helpful for the teachers and for the kids. But right now, the principals have been directed by the state to order exams, and we're just going to wait and see how it does materialize. So it is kind of up in the air, but at this point, we have to evaluate teachers the way we used to in the past, and also administer these exams as we have done in the past. So just wanted to share that update with everyone.
Could I jump back in real quick? Vinny, I wanted to circle back around your question. Mr. Hodge, of course, is watching the board meeting. So the visitor rule is actually a Section 1 decision. They are not allowing visitor spectators as a section. So it's two spectators for home players is all that will be allowed for the time being. And that's
Okay.
Section 1. Yeah.
Thank you.
That's
Thank you, Mr.
probably a
Hodge.
more, yeah, that's probably more of a clear-cut decision. So that's helpful, I'm sure, for all parents involved. Steve, thanks for this update. I keep saying we spent so much of our focus getting kids safely into school, kids and teachers. And now that the dust is starting to settle and we're starting to reflect on where we are, I couldn't help but be concerned about a lot of the things that you spoke about. So this update is certainly helpful. When I saw the update on the fact that the state is moving ahead with testing, I couldn't help but wonder all the same things, all those lingering questions that you just mentioned, weigh heavy on my heart right now.
I think it's everyone's too. I mean, I think it is one of those things that it's still reality, but again, there's so much that could change between now and then, and we just have to just keep it in mind that this is the current state of affairs, and we'll see how things progress for the school year.
Great, thank you. So next we have item 4.4, Assistant Superintendent's update on the whole child. Ms. Chung.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm very excited to report that we have started the training for the Universal Classroom DBT program this week for our secondary students. The training is focused on our health and physical education teachers. The Universal Classroom DBT program is going to be our social emotional learning program for our Tier 1 that we're focusing on. Once the teachers, this is a 4-day training, and so once the teachers have been trained, we're going to determine what the implementation process is going to look like in the spring. But we look forward to piloting this spring and then having a full implementation in the fall. We have been actually implementing the comprehensive DBT program in our therapeutic support program for the last couple of years. And we are also starting Tier 3 services using the DBT program. So adopting the Universal Classroom DBT for Tier 1 really made sense for us. We are working with cognitive behavior consultants who is providing the training, and they will continue to consult with us to support both our TSP programs and our Tier 1 and 3 services. In terms of special education, I would like to provide an update on students who are attending school on a daily basis. Just to remind you, part of the reopening plan was to give priority to students with high needs to be able to access instruction on a daily basis. And so we started the school year with having our foundations of learning students coming in every day, as well as our special class students in the elementary schools. Since the school year started, we were able to take a look at the class sizes, and we've been able to extend the daily in-person instruction to our special class students in grades 6 through 8. This week, we then looked at other programs to see if it would be possible for us to bring in additional students on a daily basis, and we have extended that option to our TSP program students as well. So again, we're looking at this on an individual basis. So even though they may be in the program, if it's appropriate for if it's been working out that they're part of the hybrid program, then they're going to remain in the hybrid program. But we're giving them the option to come in because we're able to have them, and we have the space in the classes that they're in. So this process of looking at who could come in daily, it's a little bit complicated because especially in the secondary schools, we have to look at every single one of their classes to make sure that there's room. And all of our students have 6, 7 different classes. Now that we have about 3+ weeks under our belt, I know that Dr. Champ has sent out the thought exchange. I also sent out a survey to our families with students with disabilities just to get some feedback on what's been working well for them and what's been challenging. And so any families out there, if you have a child with an IEP or a 504, you should have received an email from me on Monday. So please fill out the survey for me, and I'll gather the information. I'm hoping to have, after I have all the information, I will have a Q&A session, and I'll invite the parents to discuss everyone's concerns and figure out and troubleshoot what some of the concerns are that are out there. In the area of counseling, our counselors have started group sessions with seniors to review the college application procedures. The virtual college visits have also started last week. So I think we're trying to normalize the fall experience for our seniors to the extent possible. But I know it's never going to be the same. Hopefully it'll return to normal next year, but we'll see. But at least we're trying to do everything virtually and try to provide them with all the different experiences for their fall senior year. So that's what we're looking forward to. And that's all I have for you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Does anybody have any questions? Okay. So item 4.5 is Assistant Superintendent's update on finance and facilities. Mr. Ricky.
Hi, good evening, and thank you. Just to again follow up on what Dr. Champ said earlier, we lost power, partial power to the building about 2 o'clock this afternoon, between 2 and 2:30. Unfortunately, that loss of some of the power impacted one piece of our equipment, which caused a smoke condition, which is why we had to pull the fire alarm. Fire department came, secured the building, everything as well. And then Con Edison thankfully came this evening, and we're up and running with the power. I'm looking at my monitor right now, still waiting on internet in the office. So I know the IT folks are working on doing that, and I know they're working on that this evening as well. So again, the building is up electrically. We had the smoke, which was a direct result of losing the power, but everything else seems to be secure in the building. So thanks to Village of Pelham Public Safety and Pelham Manor Fire Department, they came very quickly. So it's always great that they will show up quickly when you need them. As Mr. Mazzaro said, we had our audit committee on September 25th, and this evening we're going to have Chris Kopf, audit partner from O'Connor Davies, come and talk about our audit, as well as Quinn Pahi, our audit manager. When we had our audit committee meeting, they talked about our year-end results as well as our extra classroom fund. As Vinny mentioned, we had 3 comments with regard to our extra classroom fund, our school lunch fund, and classification of our bond anticipation notes. With that, we've put together a corrective action plan, which is before the board this evening for approval. And once that is approved by the board, we'll post it on our webpage and also post it with the state. There's a number of catching up with our capital projects on this evening's meeting. As you see, a number of change orders that need to be brought to the board for notifications. And there's one for approval. And certainly looking at the one for approval, have to apologize for the delay in bringing that one to you. And in looking at the delays, it really took place during the shutdown in our COVID time period, and it was one that had to be acted on quickly. We were bringing the building out of the ground. We had to remove what they call is shot rock, or rock that had been blasted in the ground, and it was unsuitable to put concrete on there for our footing. So That overblasted rock had to be removed and replaced with suitable fill. And as you see, all of those tickets and all of that material was observed and verified by Triton. And before we bring any of these change orders to you, they all go through our architect and our construction manager for appropriateness. We're also doing some other bookkeeping, just asking you to reject our bid for our tents. If you recall, a few meetings ago, we shared the results of our tent bid, which were expected to come in at approximately $125,000. And this tent bid came in at about $750,000. So I can confidently make a recommendation and say, I don't think we want to spend $750,000 on those tents. As you know, and you see throughout the district, we came up with an alternative solution, which seems to be working relatively nicely. And today I don't think we lost any today with the wind. We were able to take care of them too. So we're in pretty good shape there. We're going to have a bond steering committee meeting tomorrow morning. We'll talk about our updated Hutchinson School, the work that took place this summer at the high school on the masonry, the annex roof, the Glover complex, and lastly, Prospect Hill, and our bidding strategy and design changes as we go out for Prospect Hill. And then we're asking you to dispose of 2 vehicles, which we've had around since 1989. If you recall, last year we brought 1 new vehicle on board, and trying to make sure we run pretty efficiently. And if you look at the mileage on one of them, it certainly wasn't used a lot. Not one we're looking to replace right now. Again, they go back to 1989. So we certainly got our use out of them, our money out of them, and right now they're just more of rust sitting around. And then we're bringing in some more monitors. We've had some success bringing in lunch monitors, which has been really terrific. We feel very fortunate that we've been able to do that. So we're going to be welcoming 4 new monitors. And lastly, and I know this is something that everyone on the board has certainly been hearing more about, we were able to open up Julianne's Playground, working with Town Recreation and making sure it's secured in the evening with Village of Pelham Police Department, and making sure the school playgrounds are open on non-school days and after schools as well. So it's nice to be able to do that as well. And that's all I've got this evening.
Thank you so much. Any questions? Okay, this brings us to our financial reports and motions. And in this section, we are going to get the independent auditor's report before we accept it. So I'd like to take a consent of items 5.1 and 5.2. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thanks,
Second.
John. Thanks, Ben. Any questions or comments? This is to accept the treasurer's report for the last 2 periods. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, I'll take a consent of 5.3 and 5.4. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thanks, Sue.
Second.
Thanks, Eileen. Okay, this is when we welcome our folks from O'Connor Davies to give us the report and the corrective action plan.
Well, good evening. I'd like to begin by thanking you for taking time out of your busy schedule to let me present. And before I forget, I'd also like to thank the audit committee. It's always a pleasure dealing with them. They're very well engaged. They ask a lot of questions, and they push us to try to do a little better each year. So we like that. I don't know if Jim, you're going to share the PowerPoint, or should I?
I've asked Alex to throw it up there. I think he's working on it now.
All right. So what we'll talk about is I'm going to go over the required communications with the board. And then we'll talk about your general fund, which is your main operating fund. We'll look at your results for 2020.
Thank you, Alex.
There we go. All right. We can move on to slide 2. There you go. We'll look at your major revenue sources. We'll look at a 5-year history of those. We'll try to identify some of your major expenditures, and again, a 5-year history of those. Your fund balance, which we're always concerned about. And then you do operate some other small funds. And then I added a little bit about your debt service, since you are embarking on some capital projects. So on the next slide, we'll talk about the responsibilities of those charged with governance, that's the board. And your main responsibilities are selecting and implementing appropriate accounting policies for a district of your size and complexity, to present your financial statements in accordance with US GAAP, establish and maintain effective internal controls over your financial reporting, compliance with laws, regulations, provisions, and contracts, provide us with all the financial records and documentation we need to conduct the audit, and by setting the proper tone at the top whereby both the public and the employees feel that they can come in and talk to you about any issues they may see. Next. Our deliverables is the independent auditor's report. And as Mr. Mazzaro said, you received a clean opinion. That's known as a modified opinion. It's the highest level of assurance an auditing firm can provide a client. We also issue your extra classroom activities report, the required communications and management letter. We're to communicate any fraud or illegal acts that are noted during the audit. Very pleased to say none were noted. We encountered no difficulties, as was said before, and no uncorrected misstatements. What that means is during the course of the audit, we may propose a journal entry because we're there very early at the district and information is still coming in. And any entry we proposed was accepted by the administration. There were no disagreements with management. And our timeline was, we did our prelims the first 2 days of June. We did those remotely. The field work was done in July and the audit was completed September. All right. So here's a quick synopsis of your general fund. We have our typical 5 columns where we start with the original budget, the one that was adopted by the public. We have the final budget after any modifications by the board, your actual results. There's a column there for encumbrances. What those are purchase orders where they weren't filled by the end of the year, so they're not a payable. So those roll forward as a budgetary item into the following year. And then we have your variance with the budget. So if you go to the original budget, you'll see in the first column, third line up, a negative $1,650,000. So when you adopted your budget, you anticipated the use of $1,650,495 to balance your budget. In other words, you wanted to make sure you kept property taxes at what you thought was a reasonable level. And to do so, you had to use some reserves. So the reserves you used were you had encumbrances of $325,495 that rolled over from the prior year. You appropriated out of your unassigned fund balance $700,000. And you also appropriated out of your employee retirement reserve, which you've established over the years, $625,000. Those are the components of the $1,650,000. You can see during the course of the year, you made a minor modification to it. And by the time we got to the year end, instead of using $1,650,000 of fund balance, you actually generated a surplus of $3,064,000. So you increased your fund balance by $3 million. How did we do that? You came in over budget on certain revenues. We'll talk about that on the next slide. And you came in under on your expenditures. We'll talk about that in a couple of slides. So the next slide is our revenue. So obviously your main source of revenue is your property taxes, and that came in right on budget because you get made whole by the towns. Your STAR program, you received your $2,798,000 from the state. And your sales tax came in about $226,000 over budget. The majority of the reason for that is that the County of Westchester did increase its sales tax rate by 1% in August of last year. And that generated some extra money that you weren't aware of at the beginning when you did your budget. But in addition, as we all know, during the pandemic, if we want to call it that, COVID-19 pandemic, you did see a downturn in the economy and sales tax did drop off in the second quarter, which would have been one of your payments. So you did receive less money in 2020. Your day school tuition came in about $133,000 over budget, and state aid about $42,000 under budget by the end of the year. So that accounts for the $300,000 of revenue variances. On the next slide, we do a 5-year average. or 5-year history, I should say. And I think most important to the board is you can see that your property taxes are up about $4 million over the 5 years. It's probably an average of 1.5% a year, 1.75% a year. So again, you've done a good job trying to stay within the state's 2% cap. That we know really isn't always 2%. You can see your sales tax revenue has grown as the economy has picked up. In 2016, it was 650. By 18, it had grown to 723. And then with the new 1%, you see it jump to 941,000. Day school tuition stays roughly the same every year. And your state aid had been steadily increasing up until this year, where the state started to hold back 20% on beginning with your excess cost reimbursement. And then I think one of your BOCES payments was reduced also. They call it a temporary withholding, but we all know when the state withholds it, it's always hard to get it back. On the next slide, we'll talk about your expenses. And you can see we'll just talk about the variance column. You can see under operation and maintenance of plant that you came in about 686,000 under the anticipated budget. The majority of that, again, if I'm not mistaken, was you had planned on leasing some space, and due to everything that was going on, you ended up not leasing it. I think that generated about 250 to 300,000 of savings. You also, again, because of the school shutdown, you save money on your utilities, your maintenance, and all those categories going through the year end. Your teaching, the regular school category, came in on the budget again by 765,000. Again, the majority of that is associated with the fact that with the school closed, you didn't use as many teacher aides possibly. You had vacancies you didn't fill, and you also had supplies and other items that you didn't expend until probably later in the year or early next year. Programs for students with disabilities came in under by 345,000. You ended up with 2 less students than the original budget had planned for. And in addition, services were probably reduced due to the lack of availability, with everybody being shut down for a month or two. It drove your use of services down. Transportation came in under by about $300,000. Again, no extracurricular activities, for the final semester, final quarter, I should say. And you also, again, you weren't transporting students while they were working, coming in from home, dialing in. The rest of the areas are minor. Teachers' retirement came in under because the reimbursement rate or the cost rate dropped a little bit. And again, when you have vacancies, you have some savings. So overall, we identified about $2 million worth of savings that you had. And again, I think the majority of it is associated with the COVID pandemic and the change you made from in-person teaching to remote teaching. Again, the next slide just shows some of the history for these type of expenses. And really, I don't think there's many surprises here other than health insurance has continued to grow and the cost has continued to grow. Teachers' retirement has dropped over the years because, again, the rates were dropping as the stock market started rebounding from the recession of 2008 and 9. And pretty much everything else has stayed in line for your major type expenditures. What does all this mean to you? On the next slide, we have the 5-year history of your fund balance. And again, you have various categories. You have non-spendable for prepaid expense because you do prepay some health insurance and retirement bills. You have restricted. You've put away 4.7 for possible tax surcharges. That number had dropped last year, but this year went back up to where it normally was. And again, more people file for tax certs as the economy struggles because every dime counts to them, so they look at their assessments. You have 150,000 put away for unemployment. You have almost 190,000 put away for what's known as employee benefits and accrued liabilities. That's when employees leave and you have to reimburse them for their accumulated sick and vacation time. You have money put aside for that. You have about 2.3 million of money put away for the employee retirement contribution. You're using 600,000 of that in your 21 budget. I think the good news that you have that money put away, the state's indicated again because their year end is March. And in March of this year, the stock market did decline significantly. So the rates 2 years from now will probably jump in double digits again. So the fact that you have this reserve, again, will help you in that year that the rates increase. So you don't have to increase taxes so much. You do have 1.4 million put away for the teachers' retirement system. That's a new reserve that was approved last year by the state ed department. You're only allowed to put away 2% of your teacher salaries. And then again, you can only use it if the teacher's retirement bill jumps. And again, given the drop in the market near the year end for the pension plans, you might see an increase in 2 years on that. You have some money put away for property damage, repairs, and then you have $1.3 million for future capital projects. So in that category of restricted, you have about $11 million. Again, you can't just use it for anything. You have to use it for the specified purpose. You have assigned $2,072,000. $1 million for that is the encumbrances we spoke about previously. A lot of purchase orders went out at the year end as you prepared to do your prep your classrooms and your space due to the new restrictions by the state. And then you use $655,000 again of your unassigned money so that you didn't need tax revenues to balance the budget. And you have your $3,067,000, which is about 4% of your ensuing year's budget, which is the maximum amount allowed by law. So you can see your fund balance did grow to 18.2 this year. 3 million, again, 3 million higher than last year, but more in line with 16 and 17. So again, it's not that you have excess fund balance. You're going to need that as the state continues to withhold your state aid and you face the additional costs of both conducting classes remotely and in school. So it's good that you have these funds put away. On the next page, as I said, you have some small capital, you have some smaller funds. First one is capital projects fund. Even though it indicates that you have a deficit of about 10.6 million, that's an accounting deficit. You do have $20 million worth of bond anticipation notes outstanding, and bond anticipation notes or bands aren't recognized as revenue until they're converted to permanent financing. So even though you have a deficit, you did have the cash to pay for those projects. Your debt service fund has $2 million in it. That money is restricted to pay down the debt associated with it. So as projects are closed or the capital projects fund earns interest on the money, that money is restricted to pay down the debt that you have. Your school lunch fund has about $367,000 in fund balance. You're really only allowed about $182,000. So you do have a comment that you have an excess fund balance there. We do recommend that you use that excess for one-time purchases, not for ongoing. You buy equipment, you pay for furniture, things like that, because if you use it for programs, eventually you'll end up having to raise the price of food when you use up this excess fund balance. Your special purpose fund accumulates money that's been donated to the school for specific purposes, and you have about $721,000 in that account. And again, that can only be used for the purpose that the people who bequeath the money to the district specified. And the same with your permanent fund. You can't really touch the permanent fund. Again, it allows you to use certain earnings from it, or again, for specific purposes. So you have about $600,000 in that fund. As far as your debt service goes, the district currently has about 28.9 million outstanding. It'll all be paid off within about 11 years. That's in a very aggressive pay down schedule. I think your Moody's rating probably references that you have an extremely aggressive debt service schedule. So again, you'll be paying about 2.7 million a year principal a year, but until you add new bonds, which I know you're going to for the new projects. But these bonds will be done in about 11 years, which is good to know for your tax planning into the future. So I know I went through this very quickly, again, knowing that number one, the audit committee has already heard this once before, and that you have other items on your agenda, but I'd be more than happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you so much. I know this is a very thorough process, as you and I spoke over the summer as a part of this. So does anybody have any questions? Okay.
All
Thank
right,
you
well,
so
I'd like
much.
to thank Jim
Oh,
and
yeah.
Jackie for all their work. Again, it was a very difficult time for them to, provide us with this information and also at the same time to address those needs. And I really think they did a great job in getting us all the data. And again, I'd like to thank the board and the audit committee for being so engaged. It really helps us do a better job. And, I know as a firm, we very much appreciate it. So thank you all very much. With that, you can go back to your meeting.
Okay, thank you so much. We appreciate you joining us tonight. Okay, so if there aren't any questions or comments, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. I'd like to take a consent of items 5.5 through 5.15. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thanks, Sue.
Second.
Thanks, Jess.
I have
Any
a question.
questions? Yeah.
Yeah. So, Jim, perhaps you could explain the difference between a notification and a change that we're voting on.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah, so as we go through the process, and as the board has authorized us, there are certain change orders that occur in the process. So for change orders that occur from zero to $25,000, the board is given authorization for myself as the assistant superintendent for business to authorize a change order, provided that we notify the board at the next board meeting once the change order has been executed. For the superintendent then has that authority in a graduated level from $25,000 to $50,000. So what you're seeing mainly here are those notifications of change orders for the paperwork that's finally come through. Once we exceed that $50,000 level, those change orders need to come to the board for final approval. And that's the one that we see here earlier, the one for $65,000 that I mentioned earlier for the shot rock and the replacement of the backfill. So as you look at it, some of them are $1,000, $2,000 items. I mean, a simple example for one was plumbing to put in a water fountain in the cafeteria of the new Hutchinson School. That originally was not in the original plans, but that's certainly something you want to do when the plumber is doing the full layout, when everything is wide open. And that's one of those items that we're making it. We approved, and we're making notification to the board for an item such as that tonight.
Thank you.
And Jim, we're also tracking all of these versus expected and contingency costs as well too, right?
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. We've worked with KG&D and Triton. We've reconciled our budgets. That's part of our process here. And tomorrow morning, certainly we're sharing that with our bond steering committee. And we expect to periodically share that with the board as well, so that you have an idea of where we are. Fortunately, we've been tracking at a very good level right now with the Hutchinson School. And that's very fortunate right now. And the bidding environment, we expect to be pretty good moving forward with Prospect Hill. And that's part of our discussion tomorrow morning.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, now we move on to section 6, which is policy monitoring and governance. 6.1, we have our third reading of a policy called school closures in the event of extreme heat. Eileen, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, so this is the third reading, as Jess mentioned. We've seen this policy twice before. It seems like the season got ahead of us, and we may not need this quite so much anymore, but it's still good to have in place because it'll get warm again. But hopefully we'll be in a different situation. But anyway, nothing has changed, and so that's the third reading. We'd like to go ahead and take a vote.
Great.
Any questions?
And there haven't been any changes since our second reading.
No. Yeah.
Okay. Any questions? Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? I'm not sure that I took a motion, actually.
I don't think you, I was just about to say, I think we missed the motion on that one.
Yes. Do I have a motion to approve policy, school closures in the event of extreme heat?
So moved.
Thanks.
Second.
Second.
Eileen and Leah. Okay. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? It's like we hit the rewind button for a second.
Right.
Okay, thank you. Okay, section 7 is superintendent's personnel recommendations. I'd like to take a consent of items 7.1 through 7.4. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
So moved.
Thanks, Leah and Vinny.
Yeah, so there's not much. We have a teacher who's going out on leave, but also some more substitute teachers we're approving tonight, and also some spring. Oh my God, I'm already moving ahead. It's some winter coaching appointments, and then also some updated annual appointments and positions.
And then on our side, we're bringing in 4 new monitors for lunch, which is terrific. And looks like we've got a couple of younger people either in college or just out of high school. So it's nice that we've got some people who are going to be home right now and are able to do that for us.
And I'll just add one more piece to that agenda as well, and it's a bittersweet one. But we recognize certainly Millie Bonilla, our district clerk. She's had a great opportunity for her to move up and into a bigger district with sole district clerk responsibilities. So we want to just recognize the great work she's done for us for the last 2 years, and certainly wish her well as she moves on to New Rochelle.
And Millie, from the board side, I want to echo what Dr. Champ said. You've been an immense help to us. You've really helped us really tighten up the organization side of our policy committee and all the edits. It's really smoothed out the process for us in my first few years on the board. So just thanks for all the support you've given to the board, and we're going to miss you.
We're going to miss you.
Thank you, Millie.
Thanks so much. I'll miss all you guys.
Thank you, Millie.
I know, the candy jar. I want to alert everybody that the policies might not be coming so fast or furiously.
That is so true.
Millie will not be there to keep us moving.
Thank you.
Soon
Mary.
enough. Good luck in your new district. I know they're very excited to have you. And they're
Thank you.
lucky to have
Thank you so much.
I had one question about the substitute teachers because, again, I was thinking with Steve last meeting was expressing some concern about, all the teachers being hired in New York City and what a competitive market it made for substitute teachers. And I'm just wondering how that's played out.
Yeah, it's still it's still very tight. The competition is obviously still there. The state did, though, help school districts, and it helps us waiving the 40-day limit on individuals who are not certified as teachers to be substitute teachers beyond 40 days. And that does help us because that will enable us to find very qualified people, maybe not on the certification side, maybe people working towards certification, to be building subs that we may need. And there are a number of people who are out there who our district has been trusting working with our kids for years, but there's always been that 40-day limit. So that's been waived for this year because the state understands the hardship that we're all facing.
That's great news. Along those lines, how are we doing with sort of the lunch management at the elementary level? Maybe this is more, I don't know if this is something you or Dr. Champ, I know just the lunch coverage was a topic of discussion at the beginning of the year. The principals are able to manage that both with the parent volunteers and with the teachers and staff.
Yeah, Jim may actually have one of the best updates. My
Okay.
impression is things are okay. Some of the principals are taking it kind of month by month. Jim, I don't know if you're looking still to fill any specific number of lunch monitor positions at this point.
Yes, I mean for lunch monitors, it's always a difficult position to fill just because it's an hour and a half every day. This month we're fortunate. I think we have 4 people, so we're in a good position. But with the children eating in the classrooms, without the partnership of the parents helping volunteer, it certainly makes a big difference. And that's That's something we can't count on all the time because we know people have their own professional lives and other commitments. But we're constantly working at it. We're interviewing people, and I think we did all right this month, and we'll see. We're going to keep working at it.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, section 8 is pupil personnel services. 8.1 is motion to approve Schedule D. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thanks, Sue. A second?
Second.
Thanks, John. Any questions or comments? All in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, section 9 is new business. Do we have any new business? I just had one topic that I wanted to throw out there, not to put board members on the spot, but something that Dr. Champ and I started talking about is the notion of possibly moving up our board meetings to a little bit earlier. Seems that many people are still working from home, and that because a lot of people don't have the commute home, they may be available to join us for our public meetings a little bit earlier than they might have in the past. Maybe not as many night meetings keeping us out late. So I just wanted to toss around the idea of perhaps moving up our meetings to an earlier time slot, like 7 or 7:30. Of course, our executive session would be a little bit earlier than that. It's not something we have to decide tonight, but I just wanted to toss that out there to see what impact that may have to your schedules, because of course we need our board members to be available and not rushing from trains or meetings to join us early.
Presumably that means they end earlier?
Well, that's nice too, for all of us. I think also for our,
I would go for that.
all the staff and, people who join us who have been working all day in the schools to be able to go home a little bit earlier as well. But just an idea. So I just wanted to see if anybody had any major concerns around that.
Yeah, I'm not opposed.
Are you thinking this
Nope.
is just a change for the time being, the situation, or is this a blanket change?
Nothing's permanent. Last year we changed the day that we met for a particular scheduling reason, and we decided to stick with it. But obviously, whatever change we make, we wouldn't want to change all the time because we don't want to confuse the public, right? They get used to certain times to tune in with us. But I think this is a very unique year, and so some decisions we would make for this year would obviously be reconsidering as we make plans for either the rest of the year if our conditions change quite dramatically one direction or another, or for next school year.
Okay.
Do you think shifting a full to 7:15 start for the public meeting, and then our exec being at I guess that would be 6 versus 7, is that too early for people? Another possibility is the idea that we could do a short exec before, and then anything that's left over we could reconvene in exec after the meeting, if people were concerned about how early we'd need to start. And you don't have to tell me right now. I'm just throwing out there. I know I didn't give you any
I was
heads
gonna
up
say,
on
can we have a little bit of time to think
Yeah.
about it, and then but yeah, like I said, I'm not opposed, but it's hard to
envision
think about
it,
all the
but yes.
scenarios right away.
Yes. Okay. So
Yeah.
those are kind of the two options. Is we could just bump everything up a full hour. We could bump everything up a half hour. We could do partial exec before and then partial exec after, which we've had to do in years past with the bond when we've had so much to get to, and always wanted to start on time with our public meeting. So food for thought. Okay, very good. So then this brings us to section 10, which is communications and comments from the public. And I do think the public, I know we had, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, promised that we would be welcoming people to our building, and then we had to pivot very quickly. So I'm going to retrace my steps here. So I did receive some public comment. So this first one comes from Annalisa Corsi, who lives at 212 First Street. Okay. I'm writing to share my thoughts on the hybrid model that the Pelham School District has chosen to implement. Thank you in advance for taking the time to read this. I realize that there are no easy answers and know that you are trying to do your very best for our children and working harder than ever on their behalf. But I did want to share that I have a number of concerns with the model that Pelham has chosen for hybrid learning and am not at all happy with how it's working for our children. I'm a first grade teacher in a neighboring district, Mamaroneck, and can't help but compare the two hybrid models and find myself wishing that my own children were following the model I'm using with my students. Overall, I feel that Pelham's model isn't developmentally appropriate for our younger learners, does not maximize the in-person instruction time they do get, and lacks any instruction or interaction with teachers during virtual learning. I witnessed the live streaming model firsthand for the first time last week at home with my children. I empathize with the teachers in Pelham because they have been given an impossible task. They're being asked to teach and manage children in person while also trying to engage and teach children at home. I can see that they are doing their very best to keep the virtual cohort engaged as they're teaching their in-person cohort. I feel that both the in-person and virtual children are suffering in this model. When looking at the schedules for both in-person and virtual students, there seem to be roughly 2.5 hours of academic instruction happening. In comparison, the model we use in Mamaroneck, as well as Scarsdale, Westport, and other nearby districts, has the students in school for a half day, 5 days a week, with a focus on academic instruction in person. We are not spending time on snack, lunch, recess, and specials. Those parts of the day are all done at home. Not only does this allow for more time for direct instruction, but also decreases the risk of exposure as there's no eating involved whatsoever. I'm teaching in this model currently and it's working very well, and parents and students and teachers are very happy. For very young learners like our daughter who has just started kindergarten, it's nearly impossible for her to focus on a screen for 2 to 3 hours a day, 2+ days every week. Quite frankly, she dreads it, and I've seen firsthand that she gains very little from it. Our son, who's in 3rd grade, clearly struggles to stay engaged and benefit fully from at-home virtual learning, but looks forward to his time in school. Additionally, I understand that as part of reading and writing instruction, the students are watching teachers' college videos, which I find curious. If I'm honest, it seems counterintuitive to have students watch video instruction during some of the precious few moments they have for in-person academic instruction from their teachers. I know that there are no perfect answers in this situation, but I do know that where I'm working, we are offering a model that is meeting the social emotional needs of our children as well as their academic needs. The consistency of attending school each day, even if it's only 2.5 hours a day, has been so positive and I feel has been more effective than the plan that is in place currently in Pelham. I'd be happy to speak in more detail about this and hope that Pelham will reconsider their model. Thank you again for taking the time to read this. Sincerely, Anna Lisa Corsi. Okay. Going carefully through this. Last time I missed a couple. It's tough to manage this and run a meeting at the same time. Okay, this comes from Ashley and John Matz at 244 Cliff Avenue. We're the parents of Hudson and Quinn Matz. They're both at Colonial. We wanted to pass along feedback and what we are experiencing under the current model, as well as echo some points made by other Pelham parents in terms of how other districts are executing on the hybrid model. I will start by saying that the teachers are trying to make the best of a difficult situation and seem to be understandably frustrated with the situation they've been dealt. We know you are all working very hard to make the most out of this model, and we appreciate that. We will also provide you with the same feedback via the survey you sent us, but wanted to write it out in an email as well. We both work from home during the day and see firsthand how the hybrid model is working when our kids are on their remote days. There's a lot of downtime built into the schedule with the daily IE block, daily special, snack, late start, and early finish, so the actual amount of learning is greatly diminished. Not to mention the less than half day Wednesdays where there's still snack, IE, and a special all crammed in before 11:30. Other schools in our area are taking a half day approach where the cohorts go morning or afternoon or fully focused in-class instruction. When they're home, they can do specials, independent work, lunch, etc., so as not to waste valuable in-class time on things that can be done at home. I implore you and the Board of Education to look at these models as a way to get our youngest learners more in-class attention with their teachers. Kindergartners are having their first school experience be so much less than ideal, and our first graders who miss months of kindergarten already are trying to navigate a hybrid learning environment that's designed for middle and high school age kids and not productive for kids in elementary school. In the least, we need a different model for K through 2, but the same could be applied to the entire school. We are also at a point in our district where we have navigated the first month of school with few or no incidents, and we should have a plan in place to begin getting more kids into school for longer periods of time. We are still in the dark as parents as to what the plan is to get to full, or at least the next step towards full days back in school, as a plan was never communicated, and we fear that the only plan has us in this hybrid setup for the remainder of the school year and losing an opportunity to teach and advance our kids. Thank you for taking the time to read this, and we look forward to further discussion and progress on these topics. We'd be happy to take part in a committee to explore any and all options to remedy the shortcomings of our less than ideal current situation. Okay. This comes from Jonathan Platt. I don't have his address. Without a mandatory commitment to provide interactivity between virtual students and their teacher in class, virtual students are receiving vastly different educational experiences. Some virtual students receive only a live stream feed and feel invisible, while others are actively engaged and participate via Google Meet. This disparity is fundamentally unfair. The district's contract with the Teachers Association, which calls for no technical training or support for teachers and no minimum engagement with virtual students, is inadequate. We have seen no established procedures for submitting schoolwork and receiving graded work. There have already been numerous instances where audiovisual feeds are not activated or malfunction when the student and parent is powerless to inform the teacher before the lesson is over. The only procedure offered is a phone call and having someone physically walk to the classroom to inform the teacher that he or she is muted or invisible to half the class. We are simply not using the technology effectively. Okay. This one comes from Monica Terry at 103 Clifford Avenue. Dear Dr. Champ and Ms. Domenico, thank you for everything you do for our town and children. We appreciate you and all of your teachers. As a parent of a second grader, I feel compelled to question the hybrid model. Your administration must recognize the unique needs of our youngest learners in elementary schools during our most formative years. Our small children need their teachers, their classrooms, and their structures. The current model seems to suit middle and high school students with greater self-discipline while our young are left with downtime, which must be filled by their working parents' instruction. We have had few health incidents and would like to know if there's a plan in place to begin getting our children back into school for longer periods of time, especially our elementary students who need the extra attention, or is it a one solution fits all? Okay, let me just double check that I haven't missed any that came in. I believe that's everything. Okay, thank you for your comments. We do hope that all those who wrote in will participate in the thought exchange. I know that you can't fully convey every thought that you have in mind. So for those who wrote in, they were able to give us more robust feedback. And we look forward to public comment in person next time. Okay, section 11 is Eileen's adjournment of the meeting.
Madam President, would you entertain a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thanks, Leah. Any questions or comments? All in favor? Aye. Any
Aye.
opposed? Any abstentions? All right. Thanks for joining, everybody. Have a good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye.
Thanks. Right.